A billionaire tried to buy a royal guard's dignity by throwing bills of $100 at him, thinking everyone had a price. But one grip of steel made the crowd gasp, and his money became worthless in seconds. Here's how his ego crumbled. The late afternoon crowd at Buckingham Palace parted like water as a midnight black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the curb, its engine purring with quiet authority. Maxwell Sterling III didn't wait for his driver to open the door. He burst out mid-phone conversation, his Italian leather shoes crunching against the gravel with impatient purpose. "Listen, Jenkins, when I say everyone has a price, I mean everyone," he barked into his diamond-studded phone, deliberately loud enough for nearby tourists to hear. "That environmental group? Double the offer! Triple it! I didn't build a $10 billion empire by letting tree huggers stand in my way." His presence commanded attention, though not the kind he imagined. Tourists pulled their children closer, conversations died mid-sentence, and cameras lowered as he strode past. His tailored Savile Row suit, which cost more than most people's monthly salary, seemed to radiate contempt for anyone worth less than 8 figures. "Move," he commanded, shouldering past a young couple trying to take a photo. His assistant, a nervous man clutching a leather portfolio, scurried behind him, mumbling apologies. "Some of us have actual business to conduct." That's when Sterling's steel-grey eyes locked onto the royal guard, standing at attention. The guard's scarlet tunic and bearskin cap cut a majestic figure against the palace backdrop, his posture perfect, his dedication to duty evident in every line of his bearing. Something about that steadfast discipline seemed to irritate Sterling, like a personal affront to his worldview where everything and everyone could be bought. "Jenkins," he spoke into his phone, a predatory smile spreading across his face, "let me call you back. I just found something interesting." He slipped the phone into his pocket, eyes never leaving the guard. "Let's see what kind of price tag this one carries." 2 elderly men wearing veterans' caps had just rounded the corner, their medals catching the late afternoon sun. They slowed their pace, recognizing something dangerous in Sterling's expression. The look of a man who measured everything in dollars and had never learned the worth of things money couldn't buy. "Watch this," Sterling announced to no one in particular, reaching into his suit jacket. "In my experience, everyone breaks character when you wave enough zeros in their face." The first $100 bill appeared between his manicured fingers, crisp and new, like ammunition being loaded into a chamber. The veterans exchanged glances, their weathered faces showing the calm recognition of men who had faced worse threats than wealthy bullies. They took position near a stone pillar, standing with the kind of patience that only comes from years of military service, waiting to see what lesson the afternoon would bring. Sterling approached the guard with the casual arrogance of a man accustomed to buying his way through any situation. The $100 bill danced between his fingers as he circled his target, studying the guard like a piece of art he was considering for his collection. "You know what fascinates me about London?" he announced loudly, playing to his impromptu audience. "Everyone talks about tradition and duty, but in my experience, it's just marketing. A brand. Like everything else in this world, it has a price tag." He paused directly in front of the guard, close enough to see his own reflection in the polished brass buttons. The guard remained motionless, his eyes fixed forward with unwavering discipline. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across his scarlet tunic, each medal and button telling its own story of service and sacrifice, stories Sterling couldn't begin to comprehend. "Let's start with something simple," Sterling said, his voice carrying the same tone he used when opening hostile takeover negotiations. "A little dance, perhaps? Just a small step to the left?" He reached out, attempting to tuck the $100 bill into the guard's breast pocket. Near the stone pillar, one of the veterans shifted slightly. His companion placed a steadying hand on his arm, both men watching with the patient gravity of those who understood the true weight of the uniform Sterling was treating so lightly. "No? Well, that's just poor business sense, Sterling continued, withdrawing a thick bundle of hundreds from his jacket. You see, in my world, everything's negotiable. Everything. He began to peel bills from the stack, the sound cutting through the tense atmosphere like paper cuts. 200. 500. A small crowd had gathered, their expressions a mix of discomfort and disbelief. Some turned away, unable to watch this display of wealth being wielded as a weapon. Others stood transfixed, wondering how far this scene would play out. "You know what your problem is?" Sterling continued, his voice taking on an edge of frustration as the guard remained unmoved. "You're stuck in the past. All this ceremony, all this—" He waved dismissively at the palace behind them. "Tradition! It's outdated. In today's world, loyalty goes to the highest bidder." The veteran with the steadying hand on his companion's arm straightened slightly, his campaign medals catching the light. Years of service had taught him about loyalty. The kind that couldn't be bought or sold, the kind that had been paid for in blood on foreign battlefields. Sterling pulled out another bundle of bills, larger than the first. "Maybe we're thinking too small here. How about we make it interesting?" His voice carried the false joviality of a man unused to being ignored. $1,000 to break character? 2,000 to do a little jig? The guard's stance remained perfect, but there was a subtle change in the air around him, like the stillness before a storm. His eyes, though fixed forward, seemed to hold centuries of similar challenges, all met with the same unwavering dignity. "Come on, everyone has their price," Sterling insisted, his smile beginning to crack at the edges. "In business, I've never met anyone who couldn't be bought. Union leaders, politicians, corporate rivals wave enough zeros in their face, and principles suddenly become—" He paused for effect. "Flexible." The afternoon light was fading now, casting longer shadows across the palace grounds. Sterling's shadow fell across the guard's boots, but like everything else about the Billionaire's display, it failed to make any impression on the soldier's perfect stance. "Let me teach you something about the real world," Sterling announced, preparing to escalate his game. "Money doesn't just talk, it commands. And I've got enough here to make this whole charade very interesting indeed." He reached into his jacket again, producing yet another bundle of hundreds, each bill a testament to his belief that everything and everyone had a price tag. Sterling's composure began to crack like expensive veneer, his calculated smile twisting into something uglier as his audience grew. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, spreading his arms like a circus ringmaster, "allow me to demonstrate a basic principle of economics. Everything, and I mean everything, is a transaction waiting to happen." He began circling the guard again, letting bills flutter to the ground around the soldier's polished boots. "See, I've bought and sold companies worth more than this entire street. I've closed deals that would make your head spin. But this," he gestured at the guard's immobile form, "this is just stubbornness masquerading as duty." The two veterans had drawn closer, their faces set in granite expressions that spoke of battles fought long ago. The older of the two touched his campaign medals unconsciously, decorations earned in conflicts where money meant nothing and loyalty meant everything. "Maybe we're approaching this wrong," Sterling mused, his voice carrying an edge of frustration. "How about we make it a proper show? $5,000 to do a little dance." He waved the money in front of the guard's face. "Come on, soldier boy. That's more than you make in a month, isn't it? Just a few steps, maybe a twirl. Give these tourists something to remember." The crowd's discomfort was palpable now. A mother hurried her children away, trying to shield them from the spectacle of wealth attempting to purchase dignity. An American couple watched with evident embarrassment, the wife whispering, "He doesn't represent all of us." "Still nothing." Sterling's voice rose, the facade of amusement cracking further. 10,000 then. $10,000 for 30 seconds of movement. That's what? About $300 per second. He did the math out loud, his business mind still trying to reduce everything to numbers. Best paying job you'll ever have. Guaranteed. The guard remained motionless, but something had changed in his bearing. Not a movement, not even a twitch, but a presence that seemed to grow stronger with each bill Sterling tossed. The scarlet uniform no longer looked ceremonial. It radiated authority. "You know what's funny?" Sterling continued, pulling out yet another bundle of bills. "In boardrooms, I've broken men worth 10 times what you'll ever see. CEOs, market makers, titans of industry. They all fold eventually." He began tossing bills higher now, letting them rain down over the guard's bearskin cap. "But you're going to stand there, aren't you? Playing toy soldier while I turn you into a human slot machine?" The older veteran took half a step forward, decades of military discipline barely containing his reaction. His companion touched his arm again, a gesture learned in far more dangerous situations. Both men's eyes never left the scene unfolding before them. Their presence a silent reminder of the weight of service Sterling was mockingly trying to purchase. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling's voice took on a theatrical tone again, "what we're witnessing here is a dying breed. Someone who hasn't learned that in today's world, principles are just pricing points waiting to be negotiated." He produced another stack of bills, larger than before. "Let's test that theory, shall we? $20,000. Not to break protocol, not to leave your post, just to smile. One simple smile worth more than most people in this crowd make in 3 months." The afternoon had deepened, the shadows growing longer across the palace grounds. The guard's shadow stretched behind him like an immovable anchor, while Sterling's shifted and distorted as he moved, as unstable as his grasp on the values he was attempting to corrupt. "Nothing personal," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone as he leaned closer to the guard. "This is just business. Everything's business. And in business, we have a term for people who don't know their price. We call them liars." He reached into his jacket one final time. "So let's find out what kind of liar you are, shall we?" The sun had dipped lower, casting an amber glow across the palace grounds as Sterling withdrew yet another thick bundle of bills from his coat. This one was larger than all the others, wrapped in a gold-plated money clip that probably cost more than most people's weekly salary. The leather of his hand-crafted Italian shoes crunched against the scattered money beneath them. Hundreds of dollars, reduced to nothing more than leaves on the courtyard stones as he stepped even closer to the guard, deliberately invading the sacred space that protocol, tradition, and basic human decency should have protected. $50,000, Sterling announced, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper that somehow carried to the stunned onlookers. He held the bundle close to the guard's face, letting the crisp scent of new bills fill the air between them. 50,000 for you to admit what we all know, that this, he gestured contemptuously at the uniform, the ceremonial rifle, the perfect posture, this is all just an elaborate costume party, a tourist trap, a relic that should have been retired with the horse and carriage. The veterans had gone completely still, their weathered faces showing the calm before a storm that only military men would recognize. The older one's hand had moved to his medals again, touching them like a rosary, each one a testament to values Sterling couldn't comprehend. His companion's jaw clenched, the muscles working beneath his weathered skin as he watched the scene unfold. "Let me break this down in terms everyone can understand," Sterling continued, fanning the bills like a poker player showing a winning hand. "This is 6 months' salary for standing still, a year's rent in London's finest neighbourhoods, a luxury car that would make your commanding officer jealous. All for what? 5 minutes of honesty about this little charade? About how meaningless all this pageantry really is?" He began tucking bills into every available pocket of the guard's uniform, his movements becoming more aggressive, more desperate with each passing moment. The money disappeared into the scarlet fabric like bloodstains, spreading across the honoured uniform. "Come on, soldier boy. We both know this is just a job, a performance for the tourists. Drop the act, Take the money, and we can all go home having learned a valuable lesson about how the world really works, about who really holds the power in this century." The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by some instinctive understanding that they were witnessing more than just a rich man's game. They were seeing a clash between two fundamentally different views of what gives life meaning. Parents pulled their children closer, tourists lowered their cameras, and even the pigeons seemed to sense the tension in the air, taking wing from their perches on the ancient stones. "I've broken prime ministers," Sterling continued, his voice rising with frustration. "I've bought judges. I've made generals dance to my tune. Any moment now," he taunted, his corporate confidence cracking further with each bill that failed to break the guards' composure. "They all break eventually. It's just a matter of finding the right number." His hands were trembling now, not with fear, but with barely contained fury at being ignored, perhaps for the first time in his adult life. He reached into his coat one final time, fingers grasping for another bundle, his movements jerky with rage. "Perhaps we need to add another zero. Would that do it? Would that finally show everyone here that your precious tradition is just another commodity waiting to be—" That's when it happened. In one fluid motion, precise as a sword strike, and just as impossible to block, the guard's white-gloved hand shot out and caught Sterling's wrist. The grip was neither cruel nor painful, but it carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had earned their position through more than money, through blood, sweat, and an unwavering dedication to something greater than themselves. The sudden movement caused Sterling to freeze mid-reach, his eyes widening as they met the guard's gaze for the first time. Gone was the ceremonial statue he'd been taunting. In its place stood a warrior whose eyes carried the weight of real service, real sacrifice, real honor. Eyes that had seen things Sterling's money couldn't buy or wash away. "Sir," the guard's voice cut through the evening air like steel through silk, quiet yet commanding absolute attention. The single word seemed to echo off the palace walls, carrying centuries of authority in its tone. "That will be quite enough." The scattered bills stirred in the evening breeze, worthless paper against the stones of Buckingham Palace. Sterling's assistant took several instinctive steps backward, the leather portfolio clutched to his chest like a shield against what was coming. The veterans straightened, recognition and approval evident in their bearing. They had seen this moment coming, had waited for it, with the patience of men who understood that some lessons can only be taught in one way. "You seem to be operating under several misconceptions," the guard continued, his grip neither tightening nor loosening on Sterling's wrist, perfectly calibrated like everything else about him. "First, that everything in this world carries a price tag. Second, that wealth equals worth." His eyes, hard as diamonds and twice as cutting, locked onto Sterling's face. "And third," they flickered meaningfully to the money scattered across the hallowed ground, "that you understand anything about true value." The silence that had fallen over the courtyard was absolute, heavy with the weight of history. Even the tourist crowds had stilled, sensing they were witnessing something profound, a moment when true authority put hollow power in its place. The evening sun caught the guard's brass buttons, his medals, the immaculate creases of his uniform, turning him into a living statue of what wealth could never buy: dignity, honor, and the quiet strength of unshakable conviction. Still maintaining his precise grip on Sterling's wrist, the guard spoke with the measured tone of someone who had faced far greater challenges than an arrogant billionaire. His voice carried the weight of generations, each word deliberate and sharp as a bayonet. "This uniform represents centuries of service, sacrifice, and duty. Each button, each medal, each movement has been earned through blood and valor on battlefields you'll never see." The guard's eyes, harder now than the palace stones themselves, held Sterling's gaze with unwavering intensity. "While you were building your fortune in boardrooms, men wearing this uniform were building something far more valuable. They were preserving the very freedoms that allow you to stand here and mock what you don't understand. The two veterans moved forward, their presence adding weight to the guard's words. The older one spoke, his voice carrying the gravelly authority of experience. I served with the Queen's Guard in Afghanistan, Iraq, and places whose names never made the papers. Those ceremonial rifles you were mocking, they've seen action in places that would turn your boardroom bravado to dust. This isn't a costume, the guard continued, his voice resonating across the now silent courtyard. It's a living symbol of everything money can't buy: honor, duty, sacrifice, values that can't be measured in dollars and cents. His free hand moved to his breast pocket, withdrawing one of Sterling's $100 bills with precise military efficiency. He held it up to the fading sunlight, examining it as one might inspect a worthless counterfeit. Sterling's face had transformed from its earlier arrogant smile to a mask of cold fury. The guard's grip was a reality he couldn't buy his way out of, couldn't negotiate around, couldn't simply override with another zero on a check. For perhaps the first time in his life, his money had failed to bend the world to his will. You see, Mr. Sterling, the guard's voice took on an edge of steel, what you've been trying to purchase isn't for sale, never has been, never will be. With deliberate movements, he began tearing the $100 bill, not in half, but in precise, methodical strips, each tear echoing across the courtyard like gunshots. The sound seemed to pierce Sterling's expensive suit, each rip a direct challenge to everything he believed in. The guard's white-gloved hands moved with surgical precision, reducing the bill to confetti. This note bears the phrase, "In God we trust," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. Yet you seem to trust only in the power it represents. Let me show you how much that power means here. The shreds floated from his fingers, dancing in the evening breeze, before settling among their scattered brethren on the ground. Your currency, the guard continued, reaching for another bill from his pocket, versus our currency. He nodded toward the veterans' medals. Another $100 bill emerged, followed by another methodical destruction. Ours is paid in blood, sweat, and unwavering dedication, in the lives of brothers lost, in the nightmares we carry, in the wounds both seen and unseen. The younger veteran stepped forward, his voice carrying the same quiet authority. Those of us who've worn the uniform understand something you never will, sir. There are things worth standing for that have nothing to do with standing still. Values that can't be bought, only earned through sacrifice. Sterling's jaw clenched, his expensive dental work grinding audibly. When he spoke, his voice dripped with venom. This is exactly why you'll all remain exactly where you are, standing guard over nothing while the real world passes you by. You think your precious values pay the bills. You think honor puts food on the table. His laugh was sharp and bitter. This is why I'm a billionaire and you're all just props in a tourist attraction. He yanked his wrist free, straightening his bespoke suit with jerky movements. Keep your dignity, your honor, your duty. I'll keep my empire. Let's see which one's still standing in 20 years. He turned to his assistant, who was already scurrying to gather the scattered bills. Leave it! Let them roll around in their precious principles. I'll make it back before dinner. The guard had already resumed his post, his bearing returning to ceremonial perfection, eyes fixed forward with renewed purpose. As Sterling stormed away, his Italian leather shoes crushing the scattered bills into the ancient stones, the older veteran called out one final time. That uniform, he said, touching his campaign medals, has been pressed by the weight of history, starched with the blood of sacrifice, and adorned with the medals of valor. It will be standing guard long after your empire has crumbled to dust. Sterling's response was a dismissive wave as he disappeared into his waiting Rolls-Royce, barking orders into his phone about doubling his next hostile takeover bid. The engine's purr couldn't quite mask his final words: duty, honor, sacrifice, fairy tales for those too weak to take what they want from the world. The two veterans exchanged knowing looks before departing, their own service having taught them that some people were beyond reaching, too wrapped up in their golden towers to understand the true meaning of worth. Behind them, the guard stood at his post, exactly as he had before, exactly as others would after. An immovable guardian of values that no amount of money could corrupt. As twilight settled over Buckingham Palace, the last of Sterling's scattered bills tumbled across the courtyard like autumn leaves, worthless in the shadow of real valour. The guard's shadow stretched long across the grounds, a silent reminder that while fortunes rise and fall, some things remain steadfast. Honour, duty, and the unwavering commitment to stand guard over principles that no billionaire could ever buy. What did you think about this clash between wealth and honour? Have you witnessed similar moments where money tried to buy what wasn't for sale? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you believe some things are truly priceless, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about the royal guards who stand as living symbols of dignity and duty. Hit that bell icon to never miss out on our daily uploads. Do check out our previous videos too, and stay tuned for next story about an encounter between a royal guard and someone who learned that respect isn't just given, it's earned.